And we're back now with our panel. John Meacham, I want to begin with you here. The Republican National Committee this morning is using their platform to discredit a senior African-American aide to President Trump who was fired, who now says that she has actually heard him use racial slurs. Why is the Republican Party addressing this?
Because it's now a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump organization and has been since he was clearly going to be the nominee. The Republican,
but does it suggest there's been a political cost
for the Republicans and Trump? I mean, well, there's not right now. The political cost is fairly de minimis because they're in power. Basically, broadly put, the Republican Party and the conservative movement in the United States, which are not always the same things, basically sold their soul to Donald Trump in exchange for lower tax rates and Supreme Court justices. I don't think it's a hell of a lot more complicated than that. And so now, having done that, they have to defend the often indefensible. And you have otherwise serious people who will say the craziest things in defense of Donald Trump that they would never have imagined saying before.
And yet
because this is why this was the cost of power.
Senator Tim Scott on this program was not fully defending the president, but saying he has found ways to work with him, that it's not. That's
the code, right? Yeah, that's what they're saying to get through the day. I think they're going to have an extraordinarily difficult time in the midterm and long term, not midterm elections, but the middle term and long term, because they know this isn't what they want to be. Right. I mean, this is the party of. And whether you agree or disagree with them, the party of Eisenhower and George Herbert Walker Bush and Ronald Reagan and John McCain and Mitt Romney and whatever you want to say about those folks, those were characters of the first rank, I believe, in a public sense. And now you have this remarkable takeover. And as I've sometimes joked, it's the first recorded case of a hijacker boarding a plane and the passenger side with the hijacker.
It is too, like the rhetoric doesn't match the reality. So Trump can say whatever he wants, but we know this administration is calling for the death penalty or asking for the death penalty for drug dealers. That is wild. That Nikki Haley in our team, this administration has said that the war on poverty is over, that there are only about 200,000 people in poverty.
She's disputed some of that reporting, but
you're like, this is wild. So we see his record on race, and we've obviously seen the kids in cages. That it doesn't match the rhetoric that we see him now employing that suggests that he has moved at all.
I want to ask you about that rhetoric because it's racially tinged. It's not always quite so clear. People can dispute what the president actually meant. When he tweeted this week about the NFL players and their protest, what did you hear?
He has only attacked black athletes. He has a history of attacking black people who criticize him. He didn't say anything about Eminem, who made like a whole screed against him, but he's come out against so many other people. And when we think about the NFL, it's like Colin was not protesting the flag. He was saying that Colin Kaepernick was not protesting the flag. He was saying that the country has a racist history and that so much of that racist history bleeds over to the present. That is just true, is that the police are killing people. You've seen it. I've seen it. That's what Colin was saying, and that's what the other players were saying. So you see Trump trying to silence that. I do think what Trump does that is sort of interesting is that he is like dismantling the FBI, and people are seemingly okay with that. If I said those things about the FBI, like they would be at my house again. They already visited my house once, but he says it and it's just like a normal, you're like, okay. And it's like, no, that's why he even just came out and criticized Sessions again, which I missed a day ago.
I think there's something about sort of how to interpret those statements. It's worth looking at sort of how other Republicans interpret those statements and how his statements can make their way into electoral politics. And so I'm going to focus on Virginia again because I'm a Virginian and that's just what I do. In last year's gubernatorial election, the Republican candidate, Ed Gillespie, towards the end started running mailers, attacking kneeling football players, started talking about Confederate statues, started sort of using Trump language and doing so in a way that was clearly meant to energize kind of like white anxiety, white resentment.
The argument there, though, is that it's actually about patriotism, that it's not racial. You dispute that fully.
This is all
and
coded.
Christian agrees with you.
I mean, it's to echo DeRay, when you're only attacking black football players, when it's sort of this language is also tied up in language like Blue Lives Matter and so on and so forth. It's really difficult to say that this is about patriotism, especially when the players themselves are saying repeatedly, no, this is about police brutality. And when you add that in to the sort of slippery conflation of, say, criminal gangs like MS-13 and like immigrants broadly, when you add that into the defense of Confederate statues, it begins to strain credulity to say, oh no, this is not about the clear racial stuff, it's about everything else.
Yeah, I mean, these are not dog whistles. We've all heard this phrase. This is a bullhorn for somebody like me who 30 years ago would say the same things. What he's doing is he's creating the conditions that make people afraid, and then he's using fear and manipulation to continue that cycle. You know, calling out thugs as, you know, the football players, like he said, or you know, just African Americans in general. This is all coded language that's been polished and made more palatable, because he knows it speaks to people about issues that they have a hard time arguing, like freedom of speech.
Here. Christian, thank you. We'll be right back in a moment. We just have to take this break.